Test, test, test. Test, test. Hello, good morning. How are you, Rabbi?
Thank God. Hello, sir.
Lauren, welcome. Maura Fleury, do we have you? Maura Fleury? Okay. All right, I'm just gonna call Maura Fleury and make sure her microphone is on. Just give me 1 second.
Hi, Rabbi Jacob.
Hi. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
I-
Pleasure.
I run a Montessori school in Manhattan on the Upper West Side.
Cool. I'm here at Yeshivat Leva Torah out in Ramat Beit Shemesh in Israel. So
Wow, amazing. I know Lev HaTorah. That's
yeah, thank God.
you're
Fun.
doing important work.
We hope. No, I think the reason I'm here is because I run a track for the DASCA students who are non-classical learners. So we do a lot of hands-on project-based learning, a lot of interactive experiential stuff. So I think that's why Lee wanted me to join the panel, but we'll see.
Yeah, great. So
Baruch Hashem.
I'm so curious to learn more.
Thank God. We're on the Upper West Side.
So we have a elementary school, a girls' elementary school, as well as a co-ed preschool. So the preschool is on 86th Street between Columbus and Amsterdam, and then the elementary school is on 84th Street between West End and Broadway. Are you from New York?
Cool. Okay. Jersey, West Orange.
Oh, okay.
So
You-
but I know the area. I've been around. Thank God, I have a number of friends who live on the Upper West Side. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, who doesn't, right?
Baruch Hashem.
Hi there.
Okay, Maura
You hear-
Fleury.
Hi, good morning. I hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So we're ready to start. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for agreeing to participate in the constant and continuously growth-centered podcast. On today's podcast, I wanted to discuss alternative methods of education. And I got the best and the brightest that I know to in this particular field. So my first question I wanted to throw out to you folks is, why the need for an alternative to the traditional method of education?
Right. It's just like everything else in life. Lee, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. When you just observe how things are going, what's going on, and you see that there may be gaps. You feel, you sense, you see that things could be done in a different way in order to accomplish. So that was
So
my
what are some gaps that, I mean, if you would get into specifics, what are some particular gaps that you noticed being in the field of education as long as you have?
why I started to look into different things. Well, I was a traditional teacher for a long time, many years, wonderful years. But I always am looking for what's going on, what's out there, what could be done to make things better. And I felt someone had mentioned to me about a Montessori school. A few people had mentioned to me, and I never really knew anything about it. So I went to visit a Montessori school, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. I see the children working individually, doing incredible things, and I thought that I'd love to find out more about it and see how I can bring it into the school. And I feel that having done this, we're able to reach different children in different ways. We touch them. We see who they are, what they are. They're not static. They're not in a box. So someone who's a 4-year-old can do things that a 5, 6, or more year old can do, or needs to, do things that really needs to grow in younger areas. So that's why I love this system, the Montessori system. And we blend it in our school so that it really gets to each child. You really observe each child. And I love it.
Okay.
I also want to add to what Maura Flory is saying that, if you think about the traditional model where a teacher stands at the front of the room and she is lecturing, giving over her curriculum, her lesson plan, and then the children are sitting there for about 6 to 8 hours a day, passively listening to these lectures. The people at the front of the room, they may, retain some information or become more engaged. But ultimately, we have an attention span of no more than real 20 minutes. So, even still, if they are retaining the information or actively listening for whatever duration the teacher is talking for, it still might be maybe too advanced for 20% of the class, and too slow for another 40% of the class. And then we're left with the remaining percentage of the class where it's like teaching to the middle, and you're not really reaching each and every student. You can't possibly do that. I think, like Chazal also said, that the times before conventional mass education, you had a tutor for your child. That was a luxury, of course, but it was so much more tailored and individual to the person, not so much trying to get the masses to hear information. Just because they're hearing it doesn't necessarily mean they're understanding it.
They're internalizing it.
Right. And that's why the Montessori or a multi-sensory approach, where you do use your hands and you're like really tinkering and noodling and touching and understanding and trying to extrapolate information in a very tactile way, is showing to be very effective for learning.
I would just to add my 2 cents. I don't know that the traditional model in Judaism is what we think of as education in a classical normative educational atmosphere. I mean, go to the Gemara, right? When in the Gemara do you ever see more than 3-4 lines where one person is just talking, right? It's always arguments, it's always conversation, it's always discussion, dialogue, and inevitably there's always some physical, tangible, experiential thing going on where someone says, oh, what about this? And they're like, oh, well, that's not how it works. Like, go look at that thing. Kashrut wasn't taught by someone standing in the front of a classroom, lecturing about kashrut. It was taught in people's kitchens. It was taught by you went into the kitchen, you kashered your own chickens, you checked your own vegetables. That's how it was done. It wasn't from a book on a whiteboard, with a PowerPoint presentation. It was through life. And I think, simple things that we recognize in Jewish learning, whether it be chavruta style, interaction, or whether it be the fact that there's such a thing as a shtender, right? That does transition someone from sitting to standing to all the different types of interactions. I don't think the classic model was ever what we kind of look at as education nowadays. I think it's always historically has been more hands-on. And then there was the breakaway. There was like the Lithuanian, yeshiva model that kind of got adopted as now the classical educational model kind of across the board. But I don't know that was Jewish education for many, many years, including recently, the last 50, 60, 70 years, where we started to farm out all of our kashrut and all of our soap fruit and all of the other pieces that we don't do ourselves anymore, where we don't get to see them and experience them on a hands-on basis. But I don't know that the classic model in Judaism was ever, the sage from the stage.
It assumes that every student is the same and is going to receive the information the same. And also, something I wanted to add was that it assumes that the information we're giving them is imperative for them to know, as opposed to giving them a method in which they can go out and find the information that they need themselves. How do your individual methods teach the children how to learn as opposed to just what to learn?
Can I answer that? Because I think it's such an insightful remark on your part. I think subconsciously, when we do have the sage on the stage, as Rabbi Jacob said, it subconsciously tells students, I am the gatekeeper of all knowledge up here.
Mhm. An
unfortunate.
authority.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sitting here and I am sharing with you the secret, the special stuff that I know. Now, in a Montessori classroom or a multisensory classroom or we're an active learning classroom, the children are given the responsibility and the resources to be able to find the information themselves. So, especially at the primary level in a Montessori classroom, the teacher, when giving over information, and we don't actually use the word teacher in a Montessori classroom, we call teachers guides because they're guiding children how to use the manipulative. They're supposed to use as minimal language as possible and allow for the work, the actual material, to demonstrate how to use it, and then it's for the child to figure out the lesson, okay? So this teaches children that, wait a minute, I'm independent and I have the power to go, as an adult to the bookshelf and learn a safer on my own. Or if I have a question, I can figure it out and do the research on my own. I don't have to rely on someone, to give me that information.
And it's so apropos to this time period that it coincides with the informational and technological boom where everything is available all the time, right in the palm of your hand. So it makes sense that this method is being kind of pushed forward because of the world that we're surrounded in and we're forced to live in, whether we like it or not. Rabbi Jacobs, how do you balance? You were a teacher in the high school I went to. How would you recommend balancing a secular education with a religious education? Because I left my formal education in high school and elementary school, thinking that religious studies and secular studies were one and the same. It wasn't until recently that I realized that Torah is of different stuff. It's not the same. They appear the same on the shelf, but it's not the same. How do you make that distinction in a school system where you're forced to teach both?
Lee, is that an open question?
Yes, sure. More flurry, sure.
Well, I know one of the things that I love is that the Judaic is a part of the day. It's a part of the language. It's a part of the air. So everything that we're learning, I'm the primary, the children are from 3 through 5, 3 through 6. And it's in the songs that you're singing, going to different places. It's in the read alouds that you do. It's connecting things. It's in when you're putting the works on the table that relate to the parsha or to the holiday. The stories connect again. It's in the language, the math, everything connects, which I love.
Mhm.
I love that.
It's a unified system, you're saying. But
Mhm.
my question was more, I came out of school thinking, and this is definitely a fault on my own part, but I'm wondering if there's a place in the education system to implement some way of making a very firm distinction between what's wisdom of the nations and what's Torah/truth.
I would say that I think Judaism doesn't necessarily distinguish it in that way, in the sense that, there's truth versus non-truth. I think there's knowledge and there's wisdom in the world. And I think Judaism values learning and knowledge and understanding. We see it through our greatest, rabbis, the Rambam becoming a doctor, people becoming, professionally involved, or at the very least, learning about the knowledge, whether it's the philosophy or the medicine or what have you, of the time. And they really do try to integrate. We believe in a singular bria that is created by the Kadosh Baruch Hu as a whole, and that includes knowledge of that bria, and whether it be math, whether it be science, whether it be language, we do really value knowledge. Now, obviously, yes, we do put an emphasis and an importance on Torah learning,
Precedence, yeah.
and the kedusha of that, and how that specifically speaks to our soul. But I wouldn't want to venture into an area where I would suggest, that classical knowledge as well, whether it be mathematics or science or other things, is not incredibly valuable according to Torah as well. I think that they do have tremendous value. Rav Kook is one of the major proponents that different nishamot are going to find their ways or their aspects in different places. And there are people who find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in math, and there are people who find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in science. And yes, Torah is a more, in our understanding, is a more direct road. But I think the fact that the Bria exists as a creation from Hashem allows us access to Him in all of those ways.
And finally, I would just like to add one more thing. That from the time that the children are introduced to any yantiv, any secular holiday, we have a Jewish history timeline from Rabbi Rieti's curriculum that is featured in every classroom, from toddler through 8th grade. And it is a constant source of reference, any occurrence in history. So if the students are learning about Middle Ages, the Renaissance, then they're like pointing back to the timeline to see what's going on, the Crusades, the 44 most pivotal events in Jewish history. They know what comes first, second, third, 40. It's totally amazing, even from a 3-year-old child. So like when we talk about the Parsha, when we talk about Pesach, it always goes back to the Jewish history timeline. In addition, when we teach chemistry, when we teach biology, zoology, the children are always learning that everything stems back to Hashem, and our science curriculum coincides with the Sheshes Yemei Bereshis, the 6 days of creation. So, like when it comes to the stars, astronomy, that was all last year, chemistry, physics.
You're always reverting it back to its
always
Torah origin.
Yes, it is an integrated curriculum in the most authentic way when it comes to teaching these more like general knowledge ideas. We always try to trace it back to Hashem as the creator.
Another question I wanted to ask was, how important is socialization, and how is that featured in this alternative model of education? Or is it altered from the traditional model?
I remember learning from the Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshivat Oraita, Rabbi Benny Friedman. In his educational approach, the most important part about learning, the most important piece of learning, is the question. That if you can inspire students to start asking questions, then you're well on your way, because that's what motivates them to go look for answers. And if they're not asking questions and you're giving them answers, then you're kind of wasting your time. And from that perspective, questions grow out of dialogue. They grow out of exploration. And different people sharing ideas and kind of interacting, and that motivating and inspiring people to say, wait, how does that work with what I think? And how do I feel about that? Like I said before, the very basic building blocks of Jewish learning, going back to Chavruta style learning, to dialogue, means you have to have someone on the other side of that table. You need to be socializing with other people, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, to understand a different perspective. And that's what it's all about, is really pushing ourselves to hear other people out and continuously push ourselves and challenge ourselves with what we understand, what our perception is, and how that matches up with other people. And it doesn't mean right, wrong. It means let's figure this out together. Let's come together and create a whole.
It's so important to learn to listen to the other person, because a lot of times in conversations, I had a previous podcast where we recorded, it was specifically on the topic of conversations and the imperative nature of conversations and communication in successful and healthy relationships, is to not focus on what your response is going to be to the person, but focusing really on what they're saying. And there's a major fear, I think, for people who struggle with that, myself included, is that I'm not going to have an answer that will match up to whatever they're saying, or I'm not going to have a response that's on par with what they're saying. How do we deal with that fear of not matching up to our peers?
How do you expect us to respond to that question, knowing that if we respond now, then we're just responding to what you said?
That's why I found the brightest staff around. I mean, I know you guys can handle these.
Well, I think in the classroom, one of the things is modeling, demonstrating by doing, the way we speak to the children, the way we listen to the children, the way we set up conversations, demonstrating, doing. And I think that that is the biggest gift, one of the biggest gifts that we give our children by demonstrating that.
It sounds like a real Nasa Vanishma approach, from my understanding, is that everything is really in practice before it's in theory. The theory is bred from the practice. If I'm understanding the process correctly.
I have a little bit of a different angle.
Mhm.
So, again, in a traditional classroom where children are, supposed to sit at their desks for, all this time throughout the day, they're not allowed to talk while the teacher is talking. That's why oftentimes they resort to passing notes. Like, people want to be social, and it's unnatural to keep them quiet for that long. So in a Montessori classroom, it's totally different, because during the main work cycle, which is when they get their academic work, their lessons and then their follow-up work done, the children have the freedom to rove about, like to talk to their friends if they want to, if they need to. At the same time, they're getting their work done. So no one's stifled. I feel like there's so much more liberty in a Montessori classroom that is consistent with human needs and nature. Now, of course, if that responsibility is being abused, then there's different protocols and limitations that need to be set. So it's not like a free-for-all, but that's why the teacher's also going around tone keeping and making sure that the work cycle is fluid and that everyone's engaged. But they also give the freedom for the children if they need to decompress, like after a really intense academic work. They just need like 10 minutes. They need a break for a snack. They need, just to sit and read a book, and that's okay. But as long as there is a flow, a workflow, and it's, productive in the classroom, then there are freedoms too, because these are people, and we believe, and Dr. Montessori put this in all her literature, that we're trying to raise independent citizens of the world. These are people. These aren't just children to be abused. Like, they're real individuals. And so they were always given the respect from the very beginning that most adults, that was a privilege reserved for adults, especially, in the early 1900s.
Seen, not heard.
Seen, not heard, exactly. And just do your chores, listen, and move on.
I think at a social level and within the classroom also, a lot of that need to state, my opinion, my answer, comes from someone either being afraid of being left out, like in a social setting, if I don't make a comment here, if I don't, I'm going to be the outsider in the circle that's not really participating in the conversation. Or if I say something and if I present an opinion and someone else is going to argue with me, I need to back my opinion up and prove why I'm right, because otherwise, I'm wrong, and God forbid I would say something that's wrong.
You'll look a fool.
Right. I think that when we really get down to learning, and when we create a positive learning environment, whether it be Montessori or experiential, or even within a classical, Gemara sheer learning environment, I think the environment, and it really is the responsibility of the educator or the guide to create a standard in a situation in which it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to suggest something and theorize about something and put forth, a potential idea, and know that it might not be right. And that's okay. That's part of the learning process. Is we're going to try stuff out and it's going to be wrong, and then we're going to come back to it. And that's what's great about it. That's what's
It's
beautiful
inevitable.
about learning. Yeah.
It's an inevitable part of the process. How do you get that across to the students? How do you get that across to people in general, that like, it's okay. I'm not judging you on how great or informed you are. I'm not judging you. I just want to be in this relationship, in this conversation.
So I think, like Maura Flori said, if you can model for them listening and show them, when they present an idea in Shiur or in the Beit Midrash, and you ask them about it and really get intrigued by it and say, like, I never thought of it. And the truth is, the more that we do listen to students, the more students come up with unbelievable things. As a parent, you hear your kids say stuff and you're just like, where did that come from? The other day, my daughter was getting out of the car and my wife said to her, have the best day. And my 3-year-old daughter turned back to her and said, is there any other kind of day to have? And I was just like, of course, like, she's right. Like, we have whatever day we're going to have, like, we got to make it our best day. So, like, it's the more we listen and the more we show them it's okay. And especially when we say something and someone challenges us, we have to be okay with recognizing the possibility that, you know what, maybe we're wrong, and that's a beautiful thing.
Right, right. And it really it comes down to empowering them to voice their own opinions and be okay with the outcome and the, you know, how they're received by everyone else. When you have children or students in the classroom that seem to be inhibited, greatly inhibited, not because of their intellectual abilities or capabilities, but more so because of the socialization of the classroom setting and how daunting that feels. I'm sure everyone's experienced it. I've certainly experienced it, and it's inhibiting their ability to cooperate in the group and be a part of the group, and they really want to just be invisible. How do you deal with a situation like that, or how can you facilitate them back into the group to feel comfortable?
One of the things that I know really helps children and adults is being acknowledged with specific things. So, for instance, when you walk around the room, when you sit down and you talk, you're talking to a person, you go at their level, face to face, and saying something like, I see how you are using these rubber bands, and I'm noticing the different shapes that you're making. I've never seen so many shapes, just acknowledging what they're doing. And they realize that you acknowledge it. I think that's a big thing, big boost for them.
And it has to be sincere. I was a camp
Oh,
counselor for the last
oh,
couple
it
of
has to
years.
be real. It
Yeah,
has to be.
they know more than adults. Adults, you can kind of pull the wool over their eyes a little bit easier. Children, they can pick up, you know, lies and insincerity very quickly, and
Well,
they call you out on it.
that's why you have to be specific and not say, "Oh, this is beautiful," because everything is beautiful.
Right,
But specific, look at these lines, look at these curves, things
right.
like that. You're acknowledging specific details.
What's particular to them.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Another something else I'd like to touch on is,
Well, Lee,
yeah. Yes,
can I just
please,
add a piece?
please, yes.
I, I I think also sometimes we do a little bit of a disservice in assuming that everyone needs to play that social role, as opposed to just being okay. And not that, you know, people should sit by themselves or what have you, but if there's a classroom discussion or there's a conversation being had, to approach a student during a break or in a one-on-one setting and saying to them, you know, what are your thoughts about that? And hearing them out and letting them know that their ideas or what their contributions are is valuable, not necessarily needing them to feel pulled back into the social dynamic, because there are going to be some people that are not going to, you know, jump in front of the crowd, and not that we can't help people grow that way, but I would caution us to not undervalue the ability to listen and learn from the quiet students, and not necessarily force them into the spotlight in front of everyone, because that's not always where everyone belongs. But it
Right,
doesn't mean their contribution can't be had and can't be valuable, and that they don't have incredible ideas that are worth sharing. You know,
right.
writers often are not the best speakers, but you stick them in front of a book, in front of a blank page with a pen in an empty room, and they present some of the most compelling ideas we've had historically. So
Right. It's acknowledging that their communication style, though it's not displayed best in a classroom setting, is not, it's not there. It's still there.
absolutely.
And very valued.
Yeah.
That's so true. And it means a lot for all of the quieter, shy, not out there people and students.
Yeah, I think it's so important that the arts are implemented in schools. You know, at a time I would probably roll my eyes at a statement like that, but I've seen it in my own education. Is that some people just can't shine academically or can't express themselves in an academic setting, and they need other outlets, whether it be sports or arts or things like such. And then they have the platform in which to display that, and in that way they're able to become a part of the whole of the school system. Um, Another thing I wanted to touch on was a lack of motivation or indifference towards schooling and education and learning and things like that. How do we motivate when there doesn't seem to be motivation? And whose responsibility is that even? Is it the responsibility of the teachers, responsibility of the parents, the child themselves?
I don't really think that we have that issue. in a, a very active classroom, because the children have so much fulfillment from accomplishing. Right?
Mm.
It's so gratifying to like understand something and the mastery of a concept. And with the manipulatives, Dr. Montessori was so clever because she broke apart fundamental concepts into a framework called isolating the difficulty. So it's like teeny tiny details that build to form like a concept. And this allows for children to master things more rapidly, but with concrete understanding. So they're moving from step 1 to 2 to 3 very carefully and systematically. This gives them self-confidence as they progress. And so that gives them, huge amounts of motivation and fulfillment. Moreover, in a classroom that's mixed age, it also really motivates others to perform because they see the trajectory of where they're going. I have to learn my numerals in order to get my math book, in order to do my computations. Like they see the scope and sequence of what they're learning and why, instead of something completely abstract. Like, this is a number symbol written on a board. This means 4. What does that? I don't understand what you're saying. And why is it important and relevant that I learn this now?
What role does it play in my life?
Yes.
Or will it play in my life? Whereas in your classroom setting, they see the practical rewards or outcomes of the information that they're going to
Right.
ingest.
And just anecdotally, it's not to say that one child might, not prefer, math over language arts. And if that is the case, you have to really follow the child and know what his or her interests might be to access, to like get them interested. So if a child is interested in math, you could say, all right, I know that you are very good with word problems, and I think we should make a book of all your word problems and let's write them down. So like that's the angle you use in order to reach the child and motivate him.
Start with their strengths.
Yes.
Coming at it from the other end, I think educationally, I see them 18, 19 post high school. It's funny, we're coming up to Pesach, and people kind of focus on the Chacham versus the Rasha within the 4 sons, right? The wise son versus the bad son, right? But as an educator, the one that's always troubled me the most is not the wicked son, because the wicked son is still, as much as he's antagonistic, he's still in the conversation. He's pushing for answers, and he's struggling, and he doesn't understand where he fits, but at least he's still in the conversation. The one that's the hardest for me as an educator is always the She'eno Yodei L'Shol. And sometimes it's visually depicted as a baby, but it's kind of weird that that's the case because it's not really what it means, right? It's talking about someone who's so apathetic, who's so uninterested or unable to connect that he doesn't even know how to ask a question. Right? He doesn't even know how to participate in the conversation, let alone he's not antagonistic. He's just off to the side. He's totally disconnected. And from that perspective, I think that really is hard. That's one of the hardest challenges an educator faces, is seeing a student like that and really not knowing exactly how to reach out to them. But very much in line with what Maura Feinberg suggested. I think even there you have to find the interests and the passions of that student. I have a student this year who was not particularly motivated with regard to classical approaches to learning. He's right now interested in learning Japanese because he's watching a lot of anime cartoons. And one of the hooks I used was I asked him to write a Devar Torah in Japanese for our Purim edition newsletter. So he got very interested in why does this person care about the fact that I'm learning Japanese? And by showing interest and honest interest, as we said, before, within the student's sphere of interest, then you create a common language, and it allows them to also maybe say okay, if he finds what I'm find interesting, then maybe I'll find what he finds interesting or she finds interesting, and it allows them to kind of branch back into our world a little bit as well. So I think it is the responsibility of the teacher. It's one of the roles we have. I think it's one of the hardest roles we have, but it's out there, and I think it does. Unfortunately, some students don't go to a Montessori school and don't get that passion and that understanding at the beginning, and that's unfortunate. And when that's the case, then I think it is our responsibility to pick up the pieces.
Okay. So through some sort of supplemental education. So how does that, how does one gain access to that kind of supplemental education? And I'm talking to people who even out of school and also aren't going to be in a Montessori school setting, but they'd like to start educating themselves. Maybe they're in a job that's more mechanical in nature or by rote, how do they get back into this kind of free, explorative, creative, stimulating kind of educating themselves?
I think the same way TED Talks work. TED Talks are about, finding something exciting that people are passionate about and sharing that. And I think that the most important thing would be for that person to find something that gets them excited, whether it's a presenter or a teacher, whether it's a context and a type of material. Rav Kook very much talks about how different souls connect with different aspects, and you're gonna have those souls that are Mishnah souls, and those souls that are Gemara souls, and those souls that are Kabbalah souls, and every neshama does have some hook that is quote pre-programmed into them, and we have to find each person has to find the Torah that's gonna make them fly and make them soar.
So that's just through a process of trial and error. I'm going to really probe you on this one because I think this is a very important question, because I like the practical gems that are gained from these conversations. So for myself, let's say I don't know what's of interest to me in Torah. I've been to a few classes, I've listened to a couple of shiurim, nothing really pulled me back in a second time. Do I just keep looking until something eventually clicks, or do I make a change in myself?
I think speak to people you trust. Speak to people who know you, that you've had, positive experiences with in the past, and whether they can or cannot, be the person right now in your life. If such a person exists. If not, talk to people who that you have, similar outlooks to, friends, family, people that, have been in kind of similar situations, and find out from them, like, who is it that inspires you? Who is it that you, when you're looking for, that piece, that thing that's going to motivate and inspire you to, reconnect and engage, where did you go? Who did you look at, and how did you find that?
Think of a time in the past where I was inspired, and pick those pieces apart and then return to them and see if there's still that level of inspiration.
Or the people that are inspired, and say and ask them,
right,
where it comes from. Absolutely.
Find out who has what you want, and figure out how they got it. Or ask them how they got it. Okay. So I just want to, I want to wrap up with one final question, which would be along the lines of adult continuing education. From your perspective, what are some resource recommendations or book recommendations from everyone on this topic, or really just the topic of personal development and personal growth? So
I would say sorely lacking, definitely outside of Israel, is anything in English by Rav Kook. The more that I've looked at some of the materials that have been translated of his, the more I've found just phenomenal ideology and insight. So to whatever extent, if people are really struggling, I have found his works particularly impassioned, and able to connect with a lot of different people from a lot of different strata.
Anything in particular, Rabbi?
There's a book by Rabbi Ari Zev Schwartz called The Spiritual Revolution, which is a lot of different selections of Rav Kook that's translated and reorganized topically, as opposed to just one straight book. Right. And then Hanan Morrison has Rav Kook's weekly Parsha stuff that's all translated 100% for free online. If you look up Rav Kook on the Parsha, I found his stuff great. And I would say, just as a there's a book called the Chovot HaTalmidim, the Student's Obligation, which was written by Rav Kohen Muskamin Shapiro, which is a classic for any educator or student or parent to read, which is really about kind of finding one's internal purpose and function, and just understanding how much we matter and what we do matters in the world, which I find hugely valuable, that I've gone through with students. And then the last thing is to go back to basics. I think sometimes it's so lost on us that, we learn about things as a kid, something like a moda'ani. If we started out every single day, really saying moda'ani, the last two words, Rabba munatecha, that God's faith is great. So, sometimes we forget that the last two words there is talking about not our faith, but God's faith. What do you mean God's faith is great? God's faith in humanity, God's faith in us, that I wake up and my mantra every morning is God knows I can do it.
You're important. There's a reason you're here.
Right. And on the most basic level, if we go back to, Kiddush and Havdalah and Shabbat, whatever it is, and the simplest of tefillot that we kind of shoo as like kindergarten, nursery school rhymes, but we go back and look at them, and if we really say them and really understand them, there's some of the most profound messages that have the most positive impacts on people's lives. The nature of making a blessing or kissing a mezuzah, really understanding where those come from and what they do, can be the entire system is supposed to be a daily reminder of how important we are and how much we can do. So those are the resources I would suggest.
Rabbi, just to follow up on your last back to basics recommendation. If somebody is not necessarily didn't have a formal Jewish education, how do you recommend they start to get into the brachos and the blessings and things like that? Would you struggle through the Hebrew or start with the English?
I mean, if they understand Hebrew, that's awesome. That's amazing. Then definitely go for the Hebrew, because I think it has more profound possibilities. But if they don't, then absolutely start with the English and make it easy on yourself. There's absolutely no problem with making blessings in English and saying brachot in English. According to some, it's ideal to say it in Hebrew, obviously, but to be able to really connect with it and say it in a way that we find is meaningful and we understand, absolutely. Go back and look at what the explanations are in the various different, whether it be the Art Scroll Siddur or the Koran Siddur, or there's a lot of free stuff online, and just start exploring the most basic, simplistic stages of what the meaning and understanding and values are that we're of the things that we're due. There's a lot there.
Add, as far as a recommendation for books, is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. She, everywhere. As a head of school and the manager of people, it's been very helpful. But I think even in one's day-to-day life, just focusing on relationships and how to reach people and connect with them in a respectful but effective way are skills that can always be learned and will be very valuable. And then also just, I think in the religious realm, like working on one's midos always. And I find that I'm most inspired by reading biographies of great people. So I love reading, the Satmar Rebbe or Henny Machlis or Rebbetzin Young Rice, like all those people. I feel like I love stories, and it really speaks to my heart. And it shows you how much these wonderful people give. Rabbi Jacob is holding up Henny Machlis's book. I love it. And my girls also read it, like even my 10-year-old girls, because it's just so inspiring, and to see how much people give of themselves. And even if you're not necessarily on that level, it gives you something to shoot for. And I think we all need to set goals for ourselves. And I'm inspired that way.
Okay. Maura Flory?
Okay, 1 second.
In the meantime, while waiting for more Flurry, I'm just going to throw one more final question at you. That was actually a fake out. This is the real final question. That was to see if you can make it to this question. So here, now we're at the final question, and then more Flurry. Oh wait, yeah, you're okay. Let's hear your book recommendation.
I'm sorry that they were doing fire drill testing here, which we weren't expecting. It was last minute, and so those are the sounds that you hear. But I wanted to say that as far as a book that is very, very inspiring on being determined, being doing something with all of your heart and what you believe in, is Dreams Never Dreamed. If you want to be inspired about something that happened within recent years, read Dreams Never Dreamed by the authors. He's actually the father involved in this story. I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but it's phenomenal. That is very inspiring. The other thing I would say that's inspiring is to speak always from your heart. As they say, when you speak from your heart, it enters the heart. And if you want to watch any clips of Mr. Rogers and how he speaks to the children from his heart, how, in fact, there's he was in at a Congress, a congressional meeting, because they wanted to see why they need to fund Mr. Rogers and other PBS television shows. And they were asking him questions. You could see there was a person who really wasn't quite sold on this at all. And as Mr. Rogers spoke, as they asked him questions, as he answered, it just that congressman melted away and became one of the biggest proponents of Mr. Rogers. So watch some Mr. Rogers clips to see that in action.
Okay, here, thank you, Morfleur. Here's the final question. If you had a word to give to a new parents, you know, their child is an infant and they have much responsibility. What would, if you can give them just a brief message, what would it be? Based on all your experiences, both in the classroom and in the home setting. I know it's hard to compress it into a single message, but I'm challenging you here.
That's a really big question, I think, because I feel like at different stages, different advice applies. So at the very beginning in infancy, I would say talk to your baby a lot. Like really, they want to hear language, and it helps inspire them and want to communicate with you back. And that's
The infant that can't speak, you're saying?
Yeah,
Wow.
Language.
Okay.
And then maybe at I think like you have to always try to be as objective as possible when it comes to your child. I do. I really do. I take this approach with my own kids. Some parents are very, not my kid, defensive and like protective of them. I feel like the more objective we are, the better we can serve them, because we can play their strengths and support them where they need some growth. And, I'm also a big believer in early intervention, like especially working at the preschool level. Sometimes, we take a very proactive approach in our school at Ganalia, and we observe the children. And if we see something that needs addressing, we tell the parents, and we like not that we demand that they do it, but we can't always keep the children if they won't. So, it serves this child so much better in the long run if the parents are willing and able to address whatever we've noticed, and they validate it with a professional. They really research whether it's an issue, because you could save a child so much like emotional damage in the future if you remain objective. It's not to say that if you're objective, you're not loving or you're not supportive or you're not validating their feelings, but still like guide them in a way that you can help them mature and build a little bit of resilience and not just coddling them. So,
I said it needs gavura. There needs to be some restraint. Regardless of how much love you want to give over to the child, there needs to be some restraint in that process, or else it's just too much. I don't have any children of my own, but a metaphor that I like that really drives that point home
Yes.
is.
I was gonna say yes.
You don't have any children yet, Lee.
Oh, I was gonna say that also, but I was like, there's no need. I mean, I don't. Also, I didn't want to curse the whatever. Okay,
I love you. I'm sorry.
No, I love you too. I love you. The metaphor that I like to use is a plant. You think a plant needs water, but if you overwater it, it's actually a little bit uglier than if you didn't water it at all. The death process there is a little bit worse. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Lauren was saying in different words. That process of putting a harness on the love we give and we're trying to objectify it. Okay, Rabbi Jacobs, word message to new parents.
I think that kids really learn the most from what they see and what they watch. And you can't fake a kid out when it comes to your experience of religion and your experience of learning and your experience of connecting with Hashem and finding meaning in tefillah. And from that perspective, kids see through. So I think the most important way to help someone, to help foster positive feelings of good foundational relationships and connections within Judaism and meaning, is to make sure that we're always striving to make that a reality in our lives. and to share that, to share the excitement we have, to share the positivity, and the enjoyment we have of Judaism. I know I'm throwing out anecdotes left and right here, but I remember I was once at an AJAF conference, American Jewish Outreach Professionals, and there was one of the people at a roundtable conversation who said, okay, everyone, let's face it, Shabbat stinks and it's horrible, and how are we gonna convince these people to start keeping Shabbat? And I mean, I was like a little fisher at the table. I was nobody. I was like, year one. But someone else stood up and said, like, listen, if you don't enjoy it, like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you making this your life? Why? What's the message? Like, come and suffer with me? Like, why would you do that to people? So I think that if
be your most authentic self. That's what I'm hearing from you, Rabbi Jacobs.
And consistently strive ourselves, never to get stale in our Judaism, and always push ourselves, whether it's learning, whether it's making sure we're actively engaged in a meaningful tefillah, or just really enjoying our mitzvot. Everything. I saw a new book this week in the bookstore about how to get ready for Pesach b'simcha, with love, as opposed to freaking out and cleaning and oh, we're getting ready for Pesach. Like, there's a tendency that we have to almost get stressed about it. And what message does that send to our kids? That mitzvot are something to get stressed about and angry and angst about? Like, we should be trying to figure out how to express that to them in a way that we show them that we're really excited and we're really passionate about it.
So we need to find it ourselves first before we can convey it in a positive way to our young. Maura Fleury, as a grandmother many times over. There's the alarm. As a grandmother many times over, what final message or what single message would you give to new parents?
I would say really be there for your child. Be there in every way. Listen to them. Talk with them. Mostly, a lot of times, just listen, watch, but be there.
Be present.
Be present.
Very nice. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so much. And I look forward to having many conversations with you all in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Pleasure to meet you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Lee. Great to see you again.
You too.